Welcome to Eye on America. I'm Michelle Miller. In this episode, we explore stories of innovation impacting communities from backyards and beyond. We meet an online sensation skipping the grocery store and sharing ways to forage for food outdoors. And we dive into a pioneering effort to keep manatees thriving in their natural habitat. But first, as more Americans struggle to make ends meet, a startling number of those homeless are baby boomers. Here's Jonathan Vigliotti on why older people are one of the fastest growing groups to be living on the streets.
So this is where you all sleep at night?
Yes, this is our sleeping quarters.
65-year-old Maria Negrete, her daughter and granddaughter live in their car on the streets of San Diego
Things to shower.
after losing their jobs and getting evicted from their apartment.
You have been looking for work. Your daughter has been looking for work. How frustrating has that been for you?
It's hard because as much as we try, we feel that the system pushes you to the position that we are.
Do you see a way off the streets back into a home?
No, especially with everything so expensive, like gas, the rent, everything. And that's heartbreaking for me.
Negrete is among one of the fastest growing groups of homeless. Baby boomers. Many, like her, worked low-paying jobs and had no savings to fall back on when times got tough. According to research, the number of homeless people over 55 is expected to spike to 225,000 in the next 4 years nationwide, up from 170,000 in 2017. That's a 32% jump.
I mean, this is an age, a time in one's life that should be defined by stability.
That's what you would think.
Teresa Smith started Dreams for Change, an organization that helps the homeless by providing jobs and safe parking for those with cars. Nearly half of her clients are baby boomers.
We hear the same story over and over again. I've lived in this place 10, 15 years, and now I have to move because they've increased the rent above what I even earn for a given month.
And that crisis grew during the pandemic and has been intensified by record inflation and housing costs. In San Diego, the average two-bedroom apartment is more than $3,700 a month, up 21% from last year.
What's your biggest fear, your biggest concern?
My biggest concern is that as much as we try, we might be stuck being in the car for a long time.
Stuck, like too many other working Americans, with nowhere to sleep at night.
We now turn our attention to unsolved crimes, in particular murder in major cities. Jim Axelrod met a former police chief that managed to buck the trend in her city and begin mending her community's relationship with law enforcement.
I grew up without a father who was killed in the line of duty in a police agency in the city of Detroit, and his murder is still unsolved to this day.
Renee Hall knows the pain of an unsolved homicide from both sides. The daughter of a cop shot and killed on the job when she was 6 months old. She became a Detroit police officer herself when she was 28.
And my goal is to make sure that no one else has to live through that same level of trauma.
These sessions are about how we do better.
18 years later, she was appointed chief of police in Dallas, leading a force of more than 3,600 sworn officers. Hall told us that the pandemic
You need to leave the parking garage now.
and then the civil unrest that followed the murder of George Floyd tore apart the trust between her cops and the communities they serve.
If this is a broken relationship, how do I go into your home when the homicide has been committed and say that I'm committed to you to solve a crime when you don't trust me as a police officer wearing the uniform?
During Hall's time, murders spiked in Dallas, as they did across the country. But according to numbers from the Dallas Police Department, her detectives solved more than 70% of homicides. That's 20 points higher than the national average.
One of the first things my team and I did, we met, and I told them I don't want to go to any community where we have great relationships. I only want to go to those communities where our relationships are challenged. I started there.
And then Hall set about broadening the diversity in her own rank and file.
We went from 17, 18% Latinos, Hispanics in the police department under my leadership to about 24%, because the largest portion of our community were Hispanic.
I want to show you, if you don't mind, we have the Rory Norman News Conference. We showed Hall a press conference she held in 2020.
Not only are we brokenhearted, we are angry.
After gunfire killed a 1-year-old named Rory Norman in his own bedroom. What's that about for you?
I'd gone to the hospital and saw his body, his very small body. And it was infuriating.
And this has to stop in this city.
We checked with the Dallas Police Department, and 2 years later, there's still been no arrest made in the murder of Rory Norman.
It's disheartening.
How can that be?
You know, if I had that answer, I'd be rich. There's some brokenness in the amount of guns that are on our streets. There's some brokenness in the relationships between police and the community. And so what are we going to do about it at this point? It takes work, and it takes owning where we are flawed, fixing it.
After the break, we meet a special group of people trying to save Florida's manatee population. This is Eye on America. Now to a Florida city known as the manatee capital of the world, where these adorable creatures are running out of food and humans are partly to blame. Elaine Keano shows us how one community is developing an innovative solution to the problem.
When Paul Cross navigates Crystal River and Kings Bay, Florida, he can't help but remember when algae choked these waters and suffocated native seagrass, the primary food source for Florida manatees.
We wouldn't even do manatee tours in the summer months. There wasn't as many manatees that stayed because we didn't have the food source, and the visibility when we did find those manatees was very poor.
As director of operations for Plantation Adventure Center, a local dive shop, Cross watched the river decline years ago. Storms and septic tank pollution had taken a toll. Lush green beds of seagrass had been overrun by thick mats of invasive algae. And with no food, the manatees had nearly disappeared. These tropical marine mammals can weigh up to 3,000 pounds, and they flock here in winter months to graze in the warmth of the 72-degree waters. When their numbers dwindled, along with other marine life, Lisa Moore realized the river was dying.
Personally, I thought, how did I let this happen? How did I not know that this was going on? And I've lived here all this time. I wasn't paying attention. And so I kind of felt like I needed to try to do something.
The dying river compelled Moore, a lifelong resident, to create an organization called Save Crystal River. In 2015, the group hired an aquatic restoration company with an untested idea. Marine biologist Ryan Brushwood works for that company, Sea and Shoreline.
So this is the bad guy of the story. This is Lingbia. As you can see, it's some gross stuff.
It's like the stuff at the bottom of the tub when the drain clogs.
Right. It feels like the stuff that clogs your drains. And here it was clogging springs. And it was out-competing the grass just because of the sheer quantity of it. And over time, as this settled on the bottom of the seafloor and started decaying, it created a sediment that was not suitable for the plants to grow in.
Their plan was to send divers to the bottom and use giant vacuums like these to hoover up decades of algae and muck. They'd then plant seagrass back into the bay by hand, a painstaking, expensive process. Armed with research from both the company and independent scientists, Save Crystal River took its plan door to door and then to state legislators in Tallahassee. Eventually, the group convinced lawmakers to greenlight a $1.6 million state-funded pilot project to restore about 3 acres.
People around the community A lot of them didn't believe that it would work.
Like, I was the biggest skeptic, right? When they started planting grass, and I'm like, I've seen the manatees in action. I've seen them chew roots from the trees. Like, they're gonna devour all of this stuff.
But 6 years later, the beds of seagrass in the restored areas are coming back, as are the manatees, along with fish and other marine life, as we saw in a recent swim with John Spann of Plantation Adventure Center.
5 years ago, you look down, you wouldn't see the bottom. You couldn't even see it in here. And now you can swim this whole canal as you saw, and you can just see the grass, see the bottom, and that's just that grass filtering that water, holding the sediment down, doing those good things that it's meant to do.
Residents here are also moving from septic to sewer systems, reducing runoff that feeds harmful algae.
Is it starting to look like the river you remember from your childhood?
Yeah. You go and you look at the springs, and you can see all the way down in the springs again. You can clearly see the fish. It's back, and it's just going to get better.
I imagine that must make you pretty happy.
It does. My children, my grandchildren, all the other people that come here, visitors from around the world, they need to know what this special place is.
We stay in Florida for this next story that's emblematic of a national trend since the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. Manuel Bajorquez has the story of how men are taking action.
I just want to get a feel for why you feel so confident that you're going to be happy with your vasectomy decision indefinitely.
From his office near Tampa, urologist Doug Stein calls patients who are under 30 or do not have children to discuss whether they are 100% sure they want a vasectomy, a call he's now making more often.
We generally see about 12% in our practice men who are child-free. And then we generally see about 12% of men who are under the age of 30. But the number of both young and child-free nearly doubled.
The two-doctor practice performs 6 vasectomies an hour most days.
Some decisions not just made by men, but by families.
50% of our calls are from women.
I just need you to print, sign, and date it.
27-year-old Thomas Figueroa says he and his girlfriend do not want children, so getting a vasectomy was always on his mind.
I've always thought about this decision. The Supreme Court did push me to finally do it.
The procedure, which blocks sperm from entering semen, is outpatient and takes about 10 minutes with about a 2-day recovery, as opposed to a female tubal ligation, which is riskier and much more invasive. For Figueroa, this is also about easing the burden on women who have had their constitutional right to abortion taken away, and for those who feel restrictions on birth control could come next.
I feel for a lot of men, especially for myself, that this is a way where they're trying to protect their girlfriends, they're trying to protect their partners, they're trying to protect their future partners.
In Houston, Jordan Castro's post about getting a vasectomy went viral. He did it last fall after Texas passed a law banning abortion after about 6 weeks of fertilization.
Really try to put yourself in a woman's shoes. I really think guys should take that into account and just take a little bit more responsibility.
And while vasectomies are reversible, not all reversals are successful.
All right, very good. Do you have any pain?
That's something Dr. Stein stresses to his growing number of patients.
And do you see this as a trend that will continue or just kind of a spike?
I think that maybe where the spike is over and we're tapering down a little bit, but I think we haven't tapered back down to pre-Roe overturn numbers.
Switching gears now, thieves are targeting a little-known but vital part of a car's exhaust system. Carter Evans reports on a recent Mississippi law aiming to protect drivers from an expensive loss.
They took all this piece. This is all where the catalytic converter goes and the oxygen sensors. They're all missing.
It's becoming a common sight for mechanics and an expensive lesson for car owners.
You feel violated.
Krista Washington had to pay $2,500 to replace her catalytic converter after thieves stole it in broad daylight. Working like NASCAR pit crews, crooks jack up the car and use a cordless saw to cut out the converter in seconds.
Hey, you!
This man confronted thieves as they crawled underneath his truck.
Since COVID started, the theft of catalytic converters has gone up like crazy.
From 2019 to 2021, thefts shot up more than 1,200%, with California, Texas, Washington, North Carolina, and Minnesota leading the nation.
Without your catalytic converter, you really just can't drive the car.
Consumer Reports auto reporter Benjamin Preston says what makes them so expensive is what's inside.
You'll have probably at least $1,000 worth of precious metals in a catalytic converter.
Each one can contain several grams of platinum, palladium, and rhodium, which are used to decrease noxious gases from engine exhaust. And with today's prices for those metals, thieves can sell them to scrap yards for up to a couple $100 a piece. In Los Angeles, police have offered to etch VIN numbers onto catalytic converters to deter theft. This year alone, 36 states are working on legislation to regulate how they're bought and sold. But in the meantime,
now's a good time to start keeping an eye on it and thinking about where you're parking.
Might be worth walking a few extra blocks just to park your car in a better place.
Coming up, we'll take you on a culinary adventure where you can get all the food for free. You're watching Eye on America. We close our show with a dessert of sorts. Jamie Yuccas introduces us to a popular social media star who shows millions of her followers how to forage for food and turn it into a delicious meal.
Yum. In the woods near her home in Columbus, Ohio, Alexis Nicole Nelson,
just gonna take a couple of these,
is foraging for edible plants.
Violet leaves.
She's also feeding her soul.
There is something that just puts a smile on my face. It gets my heart racing. These guys, completely edible. The little bulbs are sweet. I always feel like the tips of them are kind of asparagus adjacent.
Yeah, they are.
I feel so connected to my surroundings. We have some cut leaf toothwort in here.
Nelson invited me to join her for a walk on the wild side.
So here you can see that they look very garlic-scapey.
Our adventure began in a local park.
Boop.
Free onions.
Free onions. For the low, low price of spending time outside.
Next stop?
I do actually forage here.
A cemetery dating back to the 1700s.
These belong to the black locust tree.
Where some people see weeds or swamps, Nelson sees a supermarket.
Oh, so sweet.
So sweet. Did you know maple seeds are edible? There's a little bit of nectar in here waiting for you.
She's turned her passion into her profession.
Very torn about whether to candy these or make them savory. What do you think I should do?
Sharing her adventures and recipes on TikTok with millions.
Now they're roasty toasty. Let's try some. I say happy snacking, don't die at the end of most of my videos, mostly in jest, but also like seriously don't die. Because you can. I will love you forever, everyone at home, if you don't die.
I don't put it in a bowl. I just eat it as I go.
Foraging expert Samuel Thayer is Nelson's mentor and the author of several guidebooks.
If you're a foodie, there's flavors you cannot buy, and it's really fun. I can't imagine why it's taken so long for it to catch on. This is called alligator weed.
He's seen interest in foraging surge since the pandemic emptied store shelves and drove people outdoors. Thayer hosts plant walks around the country, like this one in North Carolina.
What's it like for you to take a newbie out with you?
It doesn't take long for me to really surprise somebody because they might be afraid it's not going to taste good. And then I give them something and they're like, whoa, that is good. Their eyes open wide and their ears perk up and they're following me. They're eager for the next plant.
Spicy smartweed.
For Nelson, foraging takes on deeper meaning. It's a way to connect with her father's indigenous ancestry and confront a history of systemic racism in America's national parks, which were segregated until the mid-1940s. To avoid trouble in natural spaces, Nelson says she dresses to appear as approachable as possible.
No one's gonna look and be like, ah, yes, the girl in the cotton candy dress. I feel like she means trouble.
Have you had the cops called on you before?
I've had the cops come up to me before asking what I'm doing after other people were curious about it. I also love an oversized hoodie, but that's not gonna be what you find me out here in, for sure.
Because of that fear factor?
Because of that fear factor, yeah. Look at all of this chicken of the woods. It's really easy to climb a tree in a dress. That's all I'm gonna say. You don't have to worry about pants splitting when you're climbing a tree in a dress. And if you give them a smell.
Back home in Nelson's kitchen,
we're going to be making black locust beignets.
Ooh. With our collection of edibles and shelves resembling a mad scientist lab, she began to whip up an all-veggie feast.
You go out and you get what you get, and then you gotta think of what you're gonna make with it all once you get home. It kind of makes life like a competition cooking show.
I like that.
The final touch? A drizzle of pine cone jam.
Okay, I'm going in for the pine cone.
And while I was skeptical at first, one bite.
It's a flavor explosion. That's delicious. Give me more pine cones.
Okay.
I was sold. Nelson hopes you will be too.
I just hope we're raising up a generation of people who, regardless of what they look like or what their background is, everyone feels entitled to the outdoors if that's a place you want to be.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News. I'm Michelle Miller. Thank you for watching Eye on America.